Hello there. We're back for another chat with some Criterion members to celebrate the Criterion 60th anniversary this year. Joining me right now are Richard Warren and Jill Warren. How you doing?
Hello.
Hi. I'm also 60 this year. I just wanted to point that out.
Well, yeah, presumably we can celebrate that at another time. We can we'll set up an entire other thread of interviews for that, obviously. So we're here to talk about the Criterion. So your involvement, both of you, has been long-standing and previous to you. Do you want to tell me how you got involved with the Criterion? Richard, let's come to you.
Okay. Well, we were both. I think we can both fairly say that we were effectively born into the Criterion. Both of our parents, Alan Warren, Jean Warren, were well, they weren't founder members quite, but they were fairly close to the start of it. And we used to have a bit of a family joke that at one stage they were so involved. This was obviously when the bar was open 4 or 5 nights a week. They were so involved in everything that if you wanted to see your parents, you kind of had to get involved in the Criterion to do that. So we sort of both did. My first show, I had to look it up. My first show was 1964, which was a production of Magic Slippers when I was 7. Sadly, I was deemed not old enough to see the Marat-Sade, about which I'm sure you have many other contributors talking, but that was my first one. And what was yours?
My first one was I played a child in the Caucasian Chalk Circle.
So you did.
My first line spoken on the Criterion stage was, Grisha, he's not playing properly.
And what year was that?
1967, something
and
like
all
that.
Of these years later, you're still, have you got all the lines, or is it just that one?
I'll give all of them if you like, but that was my first one.
I think copyright laws mean that we'd have to pay somebody if you did any more than that. So yes, that's I was just saying that the archive that's on the Criterion website, which you can link to all different people and productions. So if you want to play along at home while we're talking about these productions, you can. Richard might need his updating, because actually we've got you down as the Old Time Music Hall being your first show in 67.
Well, I really, really hope that picture has been expunged from the archive.
The picture with the candle?
No, I don't know what.
The one that was at your 60th at Keith.
Yes, that one. The
one. Waistcoat, the chubby waistcoat.
All right.
I
don't want to encourage anyone to go onto the Criterion website and look at that picture.
Going to speak of you now with it.
All I will say is that Keith Railton and Maureen Copping, rest her soul, both threatened me my entire life with exposure of that picture, which then ended up on the Criterion archive. It's a boy who liked his food poured into a satin suit that was clearly made for someone else, and I just wish it wasn't on the archive, is all I'm saying. So thanks everyone for not going and looking at it right now.
Yeah, I mean, we can just pause for a sec, because that's literally what everyone's doing right now. They've all just stopped watching.
To go look silence for it. I think
this is a line of duty moment where everybody suddenly has to go off to the archive and just double check that footage, and then now
we can pixelate the face, maybe.
Yeah,
there are not enough pixels in the world.
If you could pixelate the body, that would be better.
I shall put in the request.
Speaking of archive, I presume you haven't found any archive photographs of me in Equus, because Boots wouldn't print them.
Is that true?
Yeah. Who was the photographer? I think it was Terry Nichols was the photographer. And I was still at school at that point. So it'd have been 1976, possibly, if you look, 77. I was the girl in Equus with Lawrence Boswell, who went on to do all kinds of things that we can't talk about for legal reasons. And the photographer took the prints in those days, went to Boots, and Boots wouldn't print them because they were full of nudity and filth.
There are photos. I'm sad to say there is no nudity or filth in the photos that are on the website.
There are photos you can see him. You can see the horses. There are photos of him and John Hathaway, but there are no pictures of the bit that most people who saw it remember.
I think you should tell the story of meeting him when he came to the Theatre Royal Bath. Oh. You should tell that.
Well, many years later, I was working at the Theatre Royal Bath, so that would be 2014 or something. Lawrence Boswell went on to become a theatre director in the West End and worked at Stratford and whatever. And it turned out he was applying for a job as artistic director of the Eustonhof Theatre in Bath. I was in the education office where I was working. I came out of the education office door to the stage door, and Lawrence Boswell was standing there. And I said, "Good Lord, it's Lawrence Boswell." And he said, "I didn't recognise you with your clothes on." I'm sure you say that to all the girls. Whatever. And then he went upstairs to the interview, and then the artistic director of the theatre came downstairs and said, "Have you been naked with Lawrence Boswell?" And I said, "Well, who hasn't?" Basically. So yeah. So that story.
I'm always interested about that, doing nudity on stage, like in an amateur theatre, in a theatre where you know so many people. It's a very bold move.
I think I was the first person to do it. Jeff Bennett, I do know, although I didn't go to this. Jeff Bennett had a significant birthday party, and some event at the theatre, and he mentioned it as being one of his proudest moments, was that he'd managed to it was a kind of first in there. I mean, I was 17. I didn't eat for weeks and weeks and weeks. I wouldn't do it now. And I did. I had to ask permission from I was at Henry VIII at that point. I had to ask permission from the head teacher, who said, "Do not bring the school into disrepute." All right, whatever. And I did it. And I was in the there were not very many girls at Henry VIII at that point. There were just a few of us in the sixth form. And the whole of I walked on stage, and it was one of those 70s shows where everybody's on stage to show that you're showing and all that stuff. So we all sat around waiting to do our bit, but basically when we were not performing, we were sitting on chairs watching. I walked out knowing what was coming up. The whole of my economics set and my teacher were on A row. And it was a bit I breathed in a lot, I have to say. And then I knew what was coming up, which was that in Act 2 I had to disrobe and be instantly, to drive everybody wild with desire. And economics after that, I failed economics. I don't know if that's.
But you made a fortune.
I made a fortune. Yeah, I don't know if that's connected, but I do remember the rehearsal, the nude scene rehearsal, which right from the beginning, Jeff had said, "It's all right. We'll rehearse it a lot. We'll do it a lot, so that it's just second nature. By the time we get, we'll just do it all the time." Didn't rehearse it. Didn't do it nude. Didn't until the Saturday before the long Sunday of production week, and there was a jumble sale going on in the bar. And me and Lawrence Boswell on stage Saturday afternoon with Jeff, and he said, because he always, anybody who talks to you about Jeff Bennett will do the throat clearing. Right, all right, kids, we've got to do it now. All right, so we did. So there we are, totally naked, just literally getting down to it, and the double doors at the theatre burst open, and a woman with two massive bags of rummage walked in. She went, "Oh, bloody hell!" and walked back out, slammed the doors. And you could hear her go, "You'll never guess what's going on in there." Luckily, nobody else came in to find out, but because Jeff had spent the whole time going, it'll be, closed set. Kind of,
yeah.
No.
No one will come in. Then
the opening night of that was the first night I met my then boyfriend's dad, who I met him in the bar afterwards, and he was like, "All right, no, hello, nice to meet you." So yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah, it's always good to see the economics class coming back in for the jumble.
Yeah. Monday morning was tricky.
So your involvement was sort of from the mid 60s, late 60s till right up until the mid 80s.
Yeah, Jill particularly. I mean, our role at home, other than to look after ourselves, feed ourselves, and basically not complain. Jill developed a brilliant sideline in line learning. So Jill became the line learner for people extraordinaire, to the point where by the time the show went on, Jill knew everybody's lines better than the people who were supposed to be doing them. I was nothing like ever as good as that in those things. And then eventually we kind of, we started to get involved. I think discounting obviously the Victorian musical, which will never be spoken of again, my first show sort of as an actor in inverted commas was Guys and Dolls, whenever that was. I was at school, or maybe 14, 15, and then kind of on a bit. And then by that stage, you'd have been working backstage and in various things. And then you went on stage, and I don't think there was ever a show where the four of us in the family were all involved in one show, but there were several where there were three of us.
Yeah. I don't know whether it was much ado about nothing. Were we all involved in that?
No, I wasn't involved in that, but the other three, you three were.
it was kind of in the days which I utterly respect about the Criterion, where you couldn't just be in a show. Actually, I'm saying those days. I don't know if it's still the case. You had to, if you were going to take your curtain call, you also had to do your bit, your props, sound, lighting, whatever. I loved the fact that we all had to do everything to get, to be part of it. So yeah, there was always something we were doing.
Yeah, I remember
when you were stripping off on stage, you'd also painted that set according to the archive.
Every chance, yeah.
Well, I presumed we had to be repainted every night, given what went on it.
Certainly, one of the mother's proudest achievements, because she did a lot of acting and she did a lot of directing, and all the other things. One of her proudest achievements was in the days when, in order to get to the lighting box, you had to go up a ladder in the foyer. And the first thing that she was taught to do by the lighting team was to carry a tray of full pints in one hand whilst climbing the ladder. And that's what the new member of the lighting team had to learn to do.
Yeah.
Because at that stage, both up in the box and backstage, trays of pints would go round. The audience would come out in the interval for a cheeky gin and tonic or a lemonade to watch trays of drinks being carried backstage to get the cast through the interval.
And at that point, the lighting box wasn't the kind of console affair that is now. It was a wall of Bakelite handles that you had to literally, if to do a crossfade, would take you hours and hours and hours, and all four limbs to work. It's great.
Yep. I did do a stint on that board with you're using knees and elbows to manipulate, and then there's a thing where the handles locked onto the bar so that you could do all of the
and if you had to do a particular slow fade, or you had to unlock the bar slightly to warm the bulb up. I remember Carl telling me to warm it before you, and don't just kind of ram the light up and down. I enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, I remember being
very simple reasons never allowed anywhere near anything technical. My last technical involvement at the Criterion was it would have been a set strike where I used to go along. We all used to go along and pile in on a set strike, and I was diligently stripping carpet off a flight of steps when Jeff Bennett said, "Stop doing that because we need that on those steps." And I'd spent a happy hour stripping off all of that stuff, and it was right. You just stay at home and read things and keep out of the way.
Yeah, you've got quite a few set construction credits, a fight choreographer credit.
Yes, that that was that would have been Henry V.
It wasn't.
Yes, I did do a little bit of. I probably that was at the stage when Stratford were doing fights where a dagger would appear and slice somebody through the back of the knee, and I'd seen something and I thought, oh, I could do that. And the worrying thing about that was that on about the Tuesday or before we opened, Pete Bagley was directing that show, but then he had to go into it, so I sort of as much as I could sort of saw it through a bit the last week of it, then the swords arrived, and they were proper serious swords, and we then thought, hang on a minute, we can't be wielding these around people's heads, so that all became a little bit tamer than it might have intended to be. So I don't really deserve that credit. Like a lot of things, I don't deserve any credit for that at all.
So that was late 80s, and along with your pints backstage, that's something that's sort of it's a lot more professional these days. It
most certainly is. Yeah,
there are an awful lot of precautions now. If you even have, I remember when we did Romeo and Juliet, we had to have somebody professionally blunt all of the knives and swords and things, so that we didn't do each other a mischief.
Yes.
There is a story of a person who will remain nameless, who was playing in a Joe Orton play, who had to inject somebody. His character had to inject somebody else, and he actually literally put a needle in this actress's arm, pressed the plunger, and our mother, who was a nurse at that point, said, "Stop! The rehearsal had to wait for 20 minutes to make sure that this person didn't have a heart attack."
Yeah,
he'd actually pushed air into this woman's veins. So
You
yeah,
could do that in those days.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. God,
It's magical world of the amateur
Yeah,
theatre,
it's
darling.
not like it was.
Health
Yeah.
and safety gone mad these days. So you stayed mainly on stage, Jill. Richard, you moved into directing. Almost all of your credits since your fight choreography role.
Yeah, yes, I basically I found it more interesting. I also had having done a lot of acting at university, more than I should have done, and other things. Whatever got me into directing in the first place, and whatever I know about it, I started to learn helping your mum and Steve Higgins run the youth theatre for a while, and sort of directed a couple of things, and I found it more enjoyable than walking out every night. I quite like having the whole picture to build, and just more fun, I thought. And that, in a way, and we may go on to to talk about favourite things, but whatever directing I've ever done, either at the theatre or a little bit sort of in advertising and stuff, radio commercials and so on. The fascination for me all started at the Criterion. It started with a show that I saw in 1970, which I think lots of people have heard this story, so I'll tell it quickly, but I think still holds the record for the lowest percentage of any show ever done as a main house show at the Criterion, which is a play called A Four-Night Come, which had a spectacular cast. If you look at the cast list, you go, bloody hell, some good people there. And there were. And I was 14 maybe, and I saw it on something like the Tuesday night or the Monday night. And I was absolutely thrilled by it. So much so that I demanded to go back and see it again later in the week, which is something that I've continued to do all the way through my life. If I see something really good, if I possibly can, I will go and see it again to see how it was done. And there's something I've always liked about taking the clockwork apart and just seeing how somebody put it together. Not just the writer, although that's part of it. That is the joy. That's the part of the joy of directing a play, is taking the play apart and seeing how it works. But just how the production came together, how it worked. So kind of how you can make the sort of effect on someone that had on me. That's where that show at the Criterion in a half-empty auditorium is where I caught a theatre bug that I've had all my life. So I credit the Criterion with many, many things, but that is absolutely one of them. I will never forget that as long as I live. It was absolutely foundational for me. It's great.
I shall have to go and have a look on the archive at that, because I'm not aware of that one.
Belting play.
Possibly because of the low percentage.
Well, yeah, no, it's yeah.
It's funny talking to some other people. It's often the case that you say, "What's your favourite thing?" and they'll say, "It was tragically underattended."
Yeah.
It tends to always be something that was just sort of a bit underappreciated. Jill, what some of your favourite memories, some of your favourite productions, or because you've been an active watcher of plays as well over the years.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see A Four-Night Come, but I credit sitting and watching plays at the theatre with kind of my education in how. The things that come to mind, since I knew that we were going to be talking, Close the Coal House Door, I remember as being something that people who know me have always joked about me being a kind of old agitprop lefty, and I credit Close the Coal House Door as a kind of early version of Pitman Painters, I suppose. That had a lot an effect on me. Sergeant Musgrave's Dance, I remember, was something that I did props for. I remember one of my jobs was being in the wings, making it look as if there was a stream nearby. So I had my hands in a tray of water. But it obviously meant I watched the show every night, and I loved it. That really kind of affected me. It's made me interested in army recruitment commercials ever since. I thought that was great. Obviously, things like Guys and Dolls, I loved. I remember Cabaret. So I'm thinking of, I suppose it's the big ensemble things. But also Bent. I remember being very impressed by Bent.
Yeah.
All My Sons, yes, that you did. I mean, there were millions that I just really. And there's also, I used to like the days when, and I know this is really old-fashioned, and you wouldn't do it now, and people would cringe, but the days when people would applaud the set. There was a show, there was a particular designer called Jeff Geeden, who was just lovely, and he designed a set for Born Yesterday, which was just this massive red and gold kind of Art Deco room with staircases around the side of it. And I always thought applauding the set was a bit naff, but people almost stood up when they saw that. So I've seen some. There must be millions of other shows, but those are the ones that kind of stick in my mind as ones that really made me sit up. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which I did sound for. Mum directed that, and I really enjoyed that. I just always really, obviously being involved in watching people like Jeff Bennett and John Rusco and John Burroughs directing. Watching those people, you just think, "Oh, I'm getting a proper training here in how to do it properly."
Yeah.
So most of what they were involved in was usually good.
Criterion history is littered with those kind of heroes and people that I think, especially, as you did, I grew up around the theatre, and you knew instantly who were like the impressive people who were all doing 9-to-5 jobs.
There was one guy he was working in London. I can't remember his name, Tony something, and he was in I think it was Vivat Regina that he was in with us. So he would leave work at like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in London, get dressed on the train, get into costume on the train, and get off at the station in full Elizabethan costume. So he would get on as a kind of city guy from London, and then arrive in costume, get in a cab in full on medieval gear.
We paid to see that as a show. I mean, that's
yeah. Well, I suppose performance art now, that would be called, wouldn't it?
Yeah, probably. 5 stars, Edinburgh Fringe.
Indeed.
Yes, Five Act Regina holds a particularly special memory for me, since you've mentioned it, Jo. For some reason, because I would have been at school, so I'd have been all of 17, 18, I ended up playing the ancient French private advisor to Mary Queen of Scots, as you do. Another hilarious photograph on the archive.
I was going to say, I'm very sorry to say that is also on the archive.
There's a white beard or something.
With a little white goatee beard. The set for that, I hope this is a funny story, because it was quite funny at the time for anyone who was there, which wasn't many, because it happened on the Monday night of the performance week. The set for that was designed by the mighty Louise Bagley, who is one of the most joyous creative people we all had the pleasure of working with. And she had designed, the set was a rake, so it was a slope, which was painted with the alternate kind of heraldic symbols of Scotland and England. And that was basically it. So it was a slope that went all the way from the back wall down to the edge of the stage. And there were Elizabethan dances, and the cast all had to learn how to gavotte around whatever it is around this thing. Pavane, thank you. That's what it was. Luckily, I didn't have to do that, because I was the 70-year-old French, whatever. So I was out of those rehearsals. I used to watch it happen. Anyway, there was a scene fairly early on in the play where I was upstage with, at the top of the stage, sitting down with Mary Queen of Scots, who I was advising politically, obviously, Wendy Anderson, and Lord Darnley appeared shortly before he was then, hung, drawn and quartered, or whatever else was going to happen to him. And he appeared downstage right, and she flew down this rake to be whirled around in his arms, and the two of them disappeared into A-row. In a flurry, from my point of view, a flurry of skirts and shoes and bits and pieces. Luckily, because it was Monday night, there was nobody sitting in the middle of A-row. But I was left completely on the stage on my own until they managed to get themselves together and hoik themselves up again and dust themselves down, and then the scene carried on. And I had a fleeting moment of, do I run down there and try and solve this problem, which would have involved me being clumsy anyway, literally dropping myself on top of them with wigs and all the rest of it falling off? Or do I just sit here and wait to see what happens? But being left alone on the stage in a scene involving 3 actors was an experience I shan't forget in a hurry.
You didn't decide to wing it and sort of monologue a bit.
I was winters in Scotland are frosty, madam, I think was a line of mine in that, or something like that. That's about how well I said it as well.
Hence, conditions underfoot can be a little slippy.
They were indeed, exactly. It's health and safety, you see. If it wouldn't happen now, I rate that steep.
No,
But
you have ridges and probably a crash mat at the front.
derby harnesses, the whole lot, you know, knee pads, yeah.
Crash mats all at the front of the stage.
Yeah.
Rich, you have any other favorite productions?
Yeah, I do. As Jill said, lots. I mean, all the ones Jill mentioned, I would say were really good. John Burroughs did a wonderful production of Much Ado About Nothing, which I know Jill was in and lots of other people in. Beautiful, beautiful production. And John was a ridiculously talented, clever director and lovely to work with. I would say, I mean, I did have a little bit of a think about this. I sort of thought, okay, what would I say is the best male performance I've seen in a show that I didn't direct? Award, yeah. And I would say one of the most memorable is Mark Vishavati in Breaking the Code, where he played Alan Turing. Absolutely wonderful performance, that. Good play, but wonderful performance. And your mum, of course, in Piaf that was unforgettably good performance. So those things really, and that's not even mentioning, you know, the John Hathaways and the Graham Fairs and, you know, Bob Browning and, you know, Son of Man, remarkable individual performances, Jim Connery, a lot of good stuff, and lots of people, lots of good stuff. But they were real standout things. And I mean, the theatre's had some real high points. As we said earlier, you know, we grew up wishing we'd been allowed to see Marat Sade, which I know is an absolute sort of high point. But one of the other high points for me, partly because I ended up in it completely accidentally, was Journalists in 1977, which was the world premiere, the Wesker thing, the show that the RSC commissioned and then couldn't do. And somehow Jeff, in his way, got hold of it and learnt about it, got hold of it. And again, it's a long story, I'll keep it short, but I was at university at that point. I'd done another show somewhere else the previous week. I came back at the weekend. I saw Journalists on the Monday. And afterwards, I remember Jeff coming up to me, clearing his throat, as you do. All right, kid. He said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, well, I'm back I'm back from university now. He said, right, be here at 6 o'clock. I said, why? He said, you're in it. Somebody's dropped out. I need you in it. So I saw it on the Monday. I was in it on the Tuesday, and I played it for the rest of the week. Luckily, I could read it. I didn't have to go anywhere. I just sat. Tuesday night was the night that the several national critics were in. And it all got reviewed. And there was an amazing thing happened that night, which was that because the critics obviously had to get back to London, the ones who'd come, but they also had to file their reviews. So there was this whole thing going on that night of people who'd volunteered to let people use their living room or their kitchen to phone in their review. And I remember the last half hour of the show, you know, various people, because we didn't know who they were or where they were in the auditorium. I was on the bit that I was on was built out into the auditorium on the corner of the stage. And people were just getting up and walking out, not because they didn't like the play, but because they had to get their reviews into the national newspapers, you know, in the morning. And then people had volunteered to let them phone in the review, and then they'd take them to the station so they could get home. That was and Arnold Wesker came up to see it himself. And it was kind of great that was happening in our building in the theatre. That was a fantastic week of kind of blimey, you know, we are something. And there are many, many things you could say, and we all do say about Jeff Bennett, who taught all of us just bucket loads of things and standards and caring about it and not mucking about, having a good time, but not mucking about, not wasting time, trying to be as good as you could possibly be, not accepting being amateurish about anything, which you know, I would say is, I hope has stood me in good stead my entire life, because you just really learn from that sort of experience at the sort of age we got involved, you know. It was great. But he had real vision as well, and he could just, every now and then he would just plant a moment in that place, and you go, blimey, really? You're going to try and do that? And then it would happen. A genuine visionary thing, and that was the fruit of one of those. It's great.
I left Coventry in '84 to move up to Sheffield to work, and I've never lived back here until just now. So I wasn't involved I wasn't working on any shows after that. I'm only talking about things that I've seen since then. But in the archive, is the bar theatre that was going on in the 70s and 80s, is that mentioned in the archive?
Possibly. Yeah, I don't know whether it's just main house productions. I will have to look into that.
I'm not sure it is.
No, I'm just, because one of my abiding memories is of a bar theatre show called The Sea Anchor that Richard was in, and I was doing sound for it. And very early on, I mean, like after about 10 minutes or something, you went off stage and you had a bit of a turn. And I was like the only person in the bar with a full audience, which at that point would have been out 60 people. So I went to find out what was going on. He was having the vapors in the auditorium. I went on stage and said, "Well, we'll be back in a minute. Please have a drink." And then it became obvious that the show had to be that night's show had to be cancelled. So I walked on to this sort of plinth that had been built in the bar, and I said, "I'm really sorry, everybody, but the performance, we're going to have to cancel tonight." And I was just about to go off, and someone said, "So what happens? What happens in the play then?" So I was like, "What?" Well, so I had to sit. I sat on a stool and then just told them the story of the play.
Tracy, the whole thing.
Tracy, the whole thing, just like sitting like Val Doonican on the stool, because they wouldn't leave until they found out what happened. So that was cool.
Did the anchor do it? You can't remember. Do you remember? Well, don't spoil it now. I mean, that could come back. I have had a quick check, and it's not in the archive. So that's definitely something that we should be looking to sort of collect those things, because I remember seeing a few things in the bar that probably aren't like full scale production. So probably all of the stuff in the archive, I think, is main house.
Right.
Yeah, there was. I was sort of involved, both the little bit as an actor and a director in that. That was good fun till it wasn't, which is the evening.
Well, I was going to say, yeah. But there'd been Gotcha before that, which involved Richard sitting on a motorbike with a lit match in front of the petrol tank. That's the whole the set of the play is this kid in a school cupboard with holding a match over a petrol tank, and I was doing sound for that as well, and we were all just petrified, given how clumsy Richard is, that he wouldn't drop it in, even though the petrol tank was empty.
Yeah.
You still thought, well, there's going to be,
yeah.
That was nerve-wracking.
For a play based on Jeopardy, that would doubled the Jeopardy for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting time that there was another bar play later on in the time, Chorus and the Rock, which we rehearsed. One of the beauties of that period was you could walk into the theatre and it'd be 3 shows in rehearsal, all at different stages of rehearsal. Wherever you went, people would just be finding a little corner in which to rehearse. And Chorus and the Rock, which was a cast of 5 women, written by someone who was also a friend of mine. We rehearsed that entire show in the upstairs dressing room, in the ladies' dressing room. And we didn't even get into the performance area, which was the bar, until we finally got it going, because we needed to keep out of the way. But every now and then you get, and I know it happens now, you just get that buzz in the building where there's a read through happening here and there's a rehearsal going on there, and then some people are doing this over there. And you just think, this is sort of, as it were, proper rep theatre. This is buzzing with people doing plays. And it's great when that happens. I love that. It's nice. I've always enjoyed, from a director's point of view, almost my favourite day is the Sunday you walk in for the read through and the theatre is completely empty. And I love the fact that you walk in on your own, there's nobody else there, the stage is clear, and you think, okay, blimey, in 6 weeks' time, that's got to be full of something. Yeah. So we better get cracking. I always find that really sort of, inspiring. But those days when it's full of people all doing different bits of theatre and then all in the bar having a drink, talk, how did yours go and how did yours go?
I see, my favourite, I love production weeks in theatre, i.e. the production week being the week before the show opens, the long Sunday rehearsal, was always one of my favorite, you know, because you get up in the morning and we'd be in the kitchen making sandwiches because so we knew that we'd be there from, you know, 10 a.m. till 11 p.m. And I used to love all that. The kind of the right, it's now all coming together. The set's coming together. The lighting's coming together. People are sorting out problems. There are lots of times when you think in a production where you think, well, we'll sort that out at the tech, and that's when it happened. I love those. And the Wednesday of production week when the company, the actors were all kind of sent home, and that was when all the lighting got focused. Those are always my favourite weeks. Were just before it opened.
I think one of the amazing things about the Criterion is the work ethic is still there. Like it's just carried through because the people are the same, and that sort of ethos of, like, even stuff like set strike. If somebody left like a brick or a plank in the wrong place in, you know, the auditorium, that was very definitely frowned on. You know, people always turning up for the set strikes. So you do a full week on set, and then on the Sunday morning, after there's probably been quite a substantial party on the Saturday night, people coming in the morning to actually clear it, to give it that, make it that black box that the next production would come into.
Yeah, it's great.
No, I think it's really, yeah, there's a kind of, you know, there's a weird cleansing thing that happens about that. It's good, yeah. And you know, that whole, you know, work hard, play hard thing, which was, well, I'm not even going to say it was drilled into you, because it was just the culture. It was the culture of the place as that we grew up in. You know, everyone has a good time. Everyone drinks till whatever, but everyone's still there at 10 o'clock as it used to be on a Sunday morning, and you do it. And then what are you doing next? Oh, I'm building the set on the next one. And all of that sort of thing was great. It was a real sort of, what I've always loved about the culture of the place is it's a genuine meritocracy. You know, it didn't matter who you were, where you lived, what car you drove, whether you drove a car at all. You know, there was no fear or favour. If you were good, or you might be good, or you were keen and you wanted to learn and you wanted to pitch in, wherever you came from, you were in and you were doing. And that just, I'm not sure that necessarily happens in every company. It certainly doesn't happen necessarily in every way that people spend their leisure time. You know, golf clubs or tennis clubs, I guess because of membership fees, attract or push away certain types of people and not other types of people, and so on. But a place like the Criterion, sort of rackety as it is, that has always been, I think, absolutely part of its charm.
Yeah.
And its power as a sort of equalizer.
Yeah.
You know, that it was socially utterly equal, and I've always loved that about it.
And also to do with age ranges. I mean, I don't remember realizing how much younger or older I was than anybody else. I was usually young, I suppose, because you just were mates with, you know, somebody who you would never meet in any other walk of life. You know, you wouldn't kind of sit and have a chat with a 65-year-old bloke as a 10-year-old girl. But that time it was like, well, right, George and I are just going to have tea together because I'm doing his lines for the, you know, it was like, that's I really like that.
Yeah, and credit to our dad on this, as on so many things. I vividly remember him saying, the nice thing about being part of an amateur theatre company, as the way you spend your leisure time, is that you socialise with all sorts of different people. You know, young, old, doesn't matter. If you're all in a play, you're all in a company, well, you're all in and you'll go in the bar and you all have a drink, even if your drink's going to be a lemonade or whatever. It just doesn't matter. Whereas again, if I can't think of a good example, but you know, you join a tennis club, you're likely to be playing tennis against people broadly your own age, for example. So it hasn't quite got that, as Jill says, that kind of 10-year-old to 80-year-old. You're all trying to do something together, and you learn. One of the joys of working with the youth theatre was involving, as we did a couple of times, involving older members of the company in the productions and saying to the young people, just watch what this person does. You know, so they were not just working with their own age group, they were working with, John Hathaway came into a youth theatre show that your mum and I directed. It was just really interesting to see how the sparking off worked. And that's good too. I think, people who are keen and want to learn get an opportunity to learn from people with more experience without it in any way feeling weird or awkward. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true of all amateur theatre to a certain extent, but I think it's really interesting, sort of, well, it's not a social experiment because it's not set up like that, but socially, I think it's really interesting that you don't think twice about the age of the person you're talking to.
Yeah, something we talked about when we were setting this up. And I mean, obviously, this is, I always put this in for future people. There was a pandemic in 2020 and everything had to shut, and the Criterion has now been closed for quite a long time, but is showing signs of coming back as the lockdown ends. But when we were deciding how we could celebrate the 60th anniversary outside of the theatre, because we weren't allowed in there, it did bring home that, we're not really celebrating the 60th anniversary of a building. We're celebrating the 60th anniversary of a company and people. And again, I say the archive is amazing for that, because you can go through it and it's all about the people brought together by productions rather than the other way around.
Well, I didn't realize, just on that, you're absolutely right. I didn't realize until I looked at the archive the other day to try and find the name of the first show that I saw, because I'd forgotten it. And as I said earlier on, it was Magic Slippers. In Magic Slippers was an actress called Chris Harris, who had been my first teacher at infant school, is now known as Christine Murley, and is still a member of the Criterion.
Yeah.
And whenever I see her, and I love to see her, I can't call her anything other than Miss Harris. And she hasn't taught me for, I'm not going to say how many years it is, 57, 8 years. But she was in that very first play that I saw. And I think it's wonderful that, all of that that continuum continues. And I mean, Jill and I are part of a bit of a sort of dynasty in the place. You and Chris are, and children will be. There are numerous families where people have gone into it, gone away, come back, or stayed part of it. Whole groups of people who've literally grown up together in that building, and then gone on to do other things, and so on and so on. So it is remarkable. How the thing rolls on, and great. It's a lovely thing. Socially, it's great. Funnily enough, one of the other things that occurred to me from a kind of social point of view, and I mean the theatre is known, legendary social things have happened over the years, as we all know. We've all been part of. There have been funerals and weddings and 21st birthday parties and all manner of lovely, things have happened where the whole gang has got together without it being to do with the play. But there's something that lots of people might not remember, which suddenly came back to me. And I can't remember when it was, but it must have been back in maybe the 70s, 80s, the archive would tell us. The theatre did a production of Delicate Balance, Edward Albee's Delicate Balance, which then, and your mum was in that. Your dad, I think it might be the last time your dad was on a plane, actually. I may be wrong, but we have talked about that. They took it to Ireland. They were invited to take it, or Jeff wangled an invitation, I don't know which, to a festival of theatre in Ireland. They went to Dundalk. And as they all said, the amazing thing there, because it was sponsored by a tobacco company, the curtains opened and you were hit with a gale of cigarette smoke because everybody was smoking the free fags that the sponsor given out. They played the play. I don't know whether they did one performance or two. They were there over a long weekend. And as the people do, got friendly with a company of, I think, Czech.
Yeah, I was going to mention them earlier on.
I think they were called the Black Theatre of Prague. So they were mime artists. Yes, it was something like that. So it was effectively, puppetry where the performers were all dressed in black. It was that form of theatre. And one night in the bar, they got chatting, as theatre companies do. And somebody, quite possibly our mother, I'm not sure, invited them to the Criterion on their way home. So our lot arrived back in Coventry. How was it? Oh no, it was all fine, great. Oh, and by the way, Wednesday lunchtime, we've got this Czech theatre company turning up for lunch. We've invited them for lunch or tea or whatever it was. So we need some volunteers to put a buffet together. The inevitable trestle table Criterion buffet. And so, as always happens, people scrambled and the bar was opened, and then this coach arrived. And all these people got off the coach, including, and this is the thing that I will never forget, 2 bodyguards who were there to make sure that nobody defected.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of them posted himself at the front of the theatre, and one of them posted himself at the back of the theatre, where the, you know, by the old toilets,
With
so
rifles.
nobody could.
They both had rifles.
Yeah. And they basically guarded this Czech theatre company, who were amateur, you know, like us, they're amateurs. And there was then this remarkable social event where a lot of them couldn't really speak English, or they spoke quite broken English. And we all suddenly found a way to sort of get along and have a sandwich. And it was just a fantastic afternoon.
Yeah, there was, I've forgotten their names. There was a particular couple who spoke English that were friends with Mum and Dad, that had kind of befriended the company. They were from Ostrava in the Czech Republic.
Eva and Frank.
Eva and Frank, that's right. They sent Christmas cards for ages until, you know. They were having a conversation, and Mum was asking what it was like. And at one point Eva said, I've already said too much. If those bodyguards could speak English. So, you know, and it was really like, we were all there handing around cucumber sandwiches and swapping little kind of twinning flags and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, she said, I've already said more than I should.
It was really, really interesting.
Armed guards at a Criterion buffet. I mean, sometimes they sometimes are required.
Well, I think we can all think of people where we might have liked some armed guards there when they hit the buffet, but yeah, no, that was a proper one.
Around the pineapple and cheese, you do need a little bit of a ring of terror.
Off debris, step away from debris. Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of shows I forgot, by the way, Jay. Sorry to barge in, but I hope you forgive me for barging in because I'm about to mention you. There are a couple of more recent shows that I would put in my highlights reel. One is your production of 12 Angry Men, which was terrific, and really, really lovely use of the space. And I think it's been nice. The use of space has been good. The way Keith used it in Treasure Island, for example, was fantastic. And it's been nice to see that happening, you know, kind of over the years. And I've got to mention Nicholas Nickleby, largely because, and it came up a bit in the conversation earlier on, it's that thing of actors getting to the point of being just exhausted with a vicious rehearsal schedule. And I mean, that was a long show, 2 halves of a very long show. And I remember, because I was living in London at that point, I came up for the weekend and I was in the bar on a Friday night having a drink. And every now and then the bar doors would open and ever more exhausted actors would pour through it going, and are you all right? How's it going? Oh, God, I'm sick of it. I'm absolutely sick of it. We've been here till 11 o'clock every night for a week. Okay. And then I was invited to go in and watch the rehearsal. And it was astonishing. Absolutely astonishing, having seen everybody being so down and miserable. And I sat there on the Sunday afternoon and I said, this is astonishing. And by this time, the directors were tired. Everybody was just tired because it was an absolute beast. Oh, you remember, you were in it. And I remember somebody said, so what do you think? We're all thoroughly sick of it. I said, you're making history in the building here. This is astonishing what you're doing. Oh, whatever. Would you mind saying that to everybody? I said, of course. And I remembered standing up and making a sort of impromptu speech to try and cheer everyone up. I was saying just how extraordinary it was. And it was kind of, oh, well, great. Okay, well, thanks very much. Got to go home now. Got to go to work. So amazing achievement. But it's just interesting how it can feel from the inside to how it looks on the outside. And we've all had that feeling of thinking, I'm completely wasting my time here. I don't know why I'm doing this. And sometimes that's been
absolutely true.
And it's not very good. And we all we've all experienced that, but it's just interesting when it works, when you can absolutely, as we've all experienced both as audience members and from the other side, when you can just get an audience to go with you, even in our small auditorium in our small corner of Earlston, when you just get a bit of magic going, you just light a spark, you can genuinely create something fantastic. And it's brilliant when it happens. When that crackle happens, it's just great. Good to try and make happen.
I mean, I've got a subject to go on to, which is what you'd like to see the theatre achieve kind of in the future. 60 years in, I was saying only the other day about, I remember the 40th anniversary and thinking, that was an amazing amount of time, and we're half again on from that. What do you want to see for the 80th anniversary? Is it?
Do you want my honest gut reaction is I want to see more of Coventry reflected in the company, if it was up to me, and more of a presence in the streets. I would have an outdoor performance wing, kind of arm of the company, and I would have I'd have more of Coventry reflected in the people who were in it and in the nature of the shows.
I think I know that is a key goal of the theatre, and certainly in the last few years there's been a definite move to try and do that, because I think traditionally we have been an overwhelmingly middle class white company of people, quite tightly knit, not because of any prejudice or just
it's in the way of most of the Little Theatre Guild would say the same back in the day, and I just think it's I think the doors should be. It's always difficult for theatre managers and producers to reach an audience of people who maybe aren't that particularly interested in it. So I mean, not everybody will be interested in being involved in theatre, but to place yourself somewhere where people actually are, rather than hoping that they'll come through the doors to where you are. I think that's an ambition that people should strive to keep going. So take theatre out to other venues.
And that's in keeping with that. It's a company rather than a building.
Absolutely.
And expanding that.
I completely agree with that. I come at, as it were, that problem, which I acknowledge from a slightly different end, which is to, I think at its best, the Criterion is a real value within the city and its arts provision, if you like. I think the Criterion can offer good experience. I think it can offer good training. I think it can offer good social integration in the sorts of ways that we were talking about earlier on. And the little bits of involvement that I've had in the last few years in either taking plays somewhere else, or taking a show to the Canal Basin at the Tin was great fun. Going and presenting about the Criterion to Coventry University students who were looking on their volunteer program, and we went and made a presentation, just getting out and about a bit more, so that it's not just the doors are open, we're outside those doors, literally
bringing people in,
rather than saying we're in here and you're welcome to come in and join us. Those sorts of things. And for me, every now and then, to keep looking for ways to put the place on the map, do brave, interesting work as well as it can possibly be done, to earn the right to say all of those things, to prove that we can give people a good time, and to prove that we can provide training, and go out there and prove it, don't just say it, prove it, sort of thing. And there are many old hands, and Carl Stafford is one of them, obviously too, got involved as one of Jeff's pupils at school. There are many who would say, well, the clue is in the name over the door. And you know, the word criterion was chosen carefully because it means standard, and I just trying to keep that as high as it can possibly be, and being a bit restless about not thinking you're the bee's knees and you therefore you don't need to learn anything. That's what impresses me.
Another kind of creative idea for the use, given that going back to about the building, I think with all theatre spaces, if they're not used during the day, I think the auditorium, with its flexibility, should be used as a soundstage for the filming of shows, not just pointing a camera at the stage, but film performances within the auditorium during the day. Use it as a rehearsal space, hire it out maybe, but also create another way of producing theatre, which can then be streamed into.
Yes, and that's no year has that become more necessary than the one.
Exactly. I mean, with as with a lot of things, you know, companies who were talking about remote, flexible working from home suddenly had to, you know, it has brought forward a kind of thinking that's been kind of on the back burner, and this is, if no other time, has shown that the venue itself should be used more creatively. It's empty 80% of the time. It should be full all the time with something going on, but that doesn't have to be rehearsing a play on the stage for an audience to turn up and sit at.
No, that's a good point. I agree with that.
I know, Richard, for me, one of the most important anecdotes that I think you told me before is again from your father, saying that it's important to have a place to go and empty your pockets.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, getting sentimental about it. That is absolutely true. That was a big phrase of his. I mean, I would say, because like a lot of us, you too, Jamie, and Jill too, you know, a lot of members, you go away. I spent years living in London, but I used to look forward. I like nothing less on a Friday night than jumping on a train and getting back to the Criterion for 9 o'clock. And I used to look forward to that first pint from about Wednesday, which is something we also grew up with. Oh, it's Friday night.
Yeah.
You know, was a big call in our house growing up. And you know, you go away, you come back, you go away, you come back, you go away, you come back. And I'm just really grateful for the fact that every time I've gone away, there's been the Criterion to come back to. And it's been absolutely a spiritual home for me for as long as I can remember. And long may it continue to be for as long as I'm drawing breath. You know, we all have our ups and downs, and, you know, this happens and that happens, and dramas happen off stage and all of that sort of thing. But the continuity of the place, the fact that you can, and lots of people have experienced it, you can walk in after 10 years away on a Friday night and somebody go, oh, hello, how are you? Where have you been? We haven't seen you for a couple of weeks, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That should not be
like the Cheers bar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cheers bar is exactly
yeah,
exactly right.
I mean, and I get again, not to be too. I babysat for you. You know, I remember you before you were born. You know, I babysat for you. One of the things I did start to like on a Friday night was when you and Chris were old enough to come to the theatre, but not old enough to know that not everybody wants to hear this. You would turn up and you would recite a film that you'd just seen. Both of you would just perform this whole film. So, and everybody would be politely standing around for like 90 minutes while you just acted out a film, and it was really funny. And I remember the day that you showed me how to do that thing with your, I don't know if you still do it, with your, when you put your arm in a sleeve, you do the alien.
Oh, yes.
The alien thing. I thought that was hilarious, and I told loads of people about that after that. I still think about that. So, and now here we are trying to talk intelligently about, you know, a proper use of a venue and what a theatre means. You know, I think it's really good that after all this time, we're having a conversation.
I agree.
Over all of, you know, with all of the other stuff that's been going on in our lives, we feel relaxed enough to sit and argue with you about the lighting in this.
I vividly remember it's just come back to me, but it's about what we're talking about. A New Year's Eve where I'd have been 16, 17 maybe, and one of my schoolmates was having a party, and it was all going to be, so it was, you know, a bunch of people that age, and we were all going to have a drink, and obviously, you know, girls would be around and all of that. And I remember it got to about 10:30 at New Year's Eve, and I thought, I am so bored talking to this group of people my own age. And I quietly left the party and I walked into Earlston and I walked into the Criterion where I knew my parents would be. But I also knew there would be 50 other people that were a whole lot more interesting to be with than the group of school friends I'd just left. And I remember walking in and it was great. It was just great because it was just more interesting to be in that broader group of people than it was just to be in, you know, my own, as it were, crew.
Yeah.
And long may that continue too. And long may that be felt by younger people, all kinds of people who feel that there's a welcome in the place, and you know, you can walk in and somebody will hand you a spanner or hand you a script or hand you a piece of gel or whatever it is, and okay, great, well, we'll get to what your name is in a minute, we're trying to do this, so can you pile in? And that's always been part of the beauty of it, I think, you know, that as long as we can keep that kind of welcome going, the better.
Well, that seems like a very good point to say. Thank you very much. We can probably come back to this. So we've talked many times about interviewing people about things, but then later on bringing people back to talk about specific, if there's a specific production. I mean, maybe we'll have to do a two-parter for Nicholas Nickleby.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
It's a
Great.
pleasure.
Really enjoyable to think back over.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you, Jamie. It's good. Thanks for the invitation.
Not a problem. See you soon.